This is probably going to be a long video, so if you have the attention span of a chicken nugget, then I wish you luck. Our first approach is by dispelling common arguments I have encountered that support atheistic viewpoints. Number 1. The multiversal argument. This argument basically states that our universe is a collection of infinite universes and that life may or may not exist in multiple others, and that our universe is just one of those rare cases where parameters just happen to be so perfectly fine-tuned for Earth to accommodate life. Let's suppose that this is the case. I would propose some questions then, because scientific findings indicate that the universe is growing. If we suppose that this is the case for all universes in the multiverse, then we realize very quickly that all of these universes at one point must have either not existed, which is what they were before their Big Bang, and this would necessitate a creator anyway to create this multitude, as we know things don't randomly spawn into existence, or they were all simply a practically infinitely dense point where all the matter was condensed. In the second case, we reach a similar conclusion. If all universes were at one point in the past infinitely dense points, then what caused the first one to begin its expansion? How does an effect, its growing, not have a cause? Maybe this isn't the case, and all the universes are growing and shrinking over time. This here is a graph of the size of the universe over time if this is the case. These two sections you can see are where we most likely are right now, or in one of them, where the universe is growing. The questions I would have are, what's the period of this cycle? And is it equal among all universes, and if so, why? Doesn't that suggest something? Plus, Occam's law of parsimony suggests that the simplest explanation is usually the best. Number 2. The primordial soup argument. Unguided evolutionism, suggests that we originated from a pool of biological fluid somewhere around 3.7 to 4 billion years ago, and it's a terrible argument. Let's start this from the ground up. Moving forward some billion years from the Big Bang, an asteroid or not or something carried atoms that formed amino acids. Either way, they just happened to be on Earth, and it's most likely that these acids formed through the passing of electricity through methane gas, which is about 1 in 1,020 chance. Number 2. These formed enzymes, and there are about 2,000 of these, 1,300 of which can be found in the human body. Even the least complex, which is 2 amino acids, would have a probability of about 1 in a million of forming. Enzymes have at least 100 amino acids in them, so imagine how improbable one of those forming would be. And remember that this also would have to happen in the right order alongside the Earth's destructive tendencies. Somehow, along with the Earth's destructive tendencies, all of these things randomly came together to form extremely complex systems, and I'll deal with this in the next argument. I myself am a theistic evolutionist, but my point remains, randomness cannot explain or result in complexity. If someone told you that a brick house laid itself, what would you think? And how much more complicated are we? Number 3. The anthropic cosmological principle. There are 10 steps listed in this book that needed to happen in the course of evolution, some of which are the development of aerobic respiration, the development of an inner skeleton, and the development of eyes. All of these are incredibly improbable, presuming atheism, and none of these systems can evolve piecemeal, i.e. one section at a time. ChatGPT writes, when asked for a naturalistic explanation of blood clotting, it is hypothesized that the initial steps in blood clotting, which is a complicated process with many constituent processes, may have evolved from a primordial pathway that was used for wound healing. Over time, this pathway may have become more complex with the duplication and modification of genes that code for the proteins involved in blood clotting. Do you honestly think, along with the destructive properties of early Earth, that all of these processes randomly became complex enough without any sort of intention? I'll now provide some arguments in favor of God's existence. The first two aren't necessarily arguments for a God, but there are arguments for an ultimate beginning, regardless of the Big Bang. Number 1. The second law of thermodynamics. This is a known law that indicates that the amount of usable energy, note that this is usable energy, which doesn't include all energy, in the known universe is slowly decreasing over time. As the universe expands, the available energy becomes more dispersed and less concentrated, and the entropy, the degree of randomness, of the universe as a whole increases, which means that the amount of usable energy in the universe is gradually decreasing over time, and there will come a point in the far future where there will be no more usable energy left to do useful work. It's important to note that the usable energy available for doing useful work depends on the context and the specific process being considered. For example, there may be sources of usable energy that we've not yet discovered. But, unlike God, there's nothing to imply that this is the case, unlike the other arguments I'll put forward in my argument. The point still stands that we're running out of energy, and this naturally implies that there's not an infinite supply of energy in the universe, that there was a beginning, and that there will be an end. Number 2, the impossibility of an infinite time span within our universe. This basically states that given that we have memory, and we cannot recall future events, and know that in this universe things happen as a logical sequence of events, i.e. one after the other, the time cannot be eternal, because if it were, we would constantly stay at an equal distance in time away from the beginning as we do to the end of it. That is, an infinite distance, as nothing would happen. In summary, this impossibility arises because time is measurable, sequential, and countable. Number 3, the teleological argument. This argument asks you to look at your surroundings and reason to yourself about how complexity and order can arise from simplicity and disorder without no form of intelligent motivation. It's tough, right? Another way to put this is, how can a cause have a greater effect than itself? How can randomness and chaos have intelligence enough to create stability in its own being? Number 4, the fine-tuning argument. Stephen Hawking himself admitted that 1. The odds against a universe like ours emerging out of something like the Big Bang are enormous. I think there are clearly religious implications. He also said, if the rate of expansion 1 second after the Big Bang had been smaller by even 1 part in 100,000 million, it would have recollapsed before it reached its present size. A scientist called Charles Darwin said, reason tells me of the extreme difficulty, or rather impossibility, of conceiving this immense and wonderful universe, including man with its capacity for looking backwards and far into futurity, as the result of blind chance or necessity. When thus reflecting, I feel compelled to look to a first cause for having an intelligent mind, in some degree analogous to a man, and I deserve to be called a theist. Number 5. The Kalam cosmological argument. To be clear, this one doesn't prove the existence of God, but it certainly implies it. Number 1. Whatever begins to exist has to have a cause. Number 2. The universe began to exist, i.e. by the Big Bang. And number 3. Therefore, the universe was caused by God. Number 6. The constancy of the laws of nature. Since ancient history, there have never been any records of the rules of the universe changing. For example, gravity and the behavior of forces in matter. If the universe spontaneously generated, then how come I know with certainty that, ceteris paribus, should I drop a cup, it will fall and not levitate? Doesn't this imply some sort of sovereign rule maintainer or giver that governs over creation? Given that, should there not be one, there would not be any reason for the rules of reality to stay fixed. I cannot supply a naturalistic reason for why they would change, but equally, I cannot supply a reason for them to stay fixed either. Number 7. The mental argument. Here you need to confront the reality of non-physical entities such as numbers, values, and propositions. You need to explain our capacity for moral awareness, conceptual thought, our power to articulate and understand meaningful symbols, our rational powers, our pursuit of beauty, our use of language, and our fear of extinction. You need to also explain the non-identity of the brain, mental phenomena, the fact of private access, which is the ability to know our thoughts with directness and certainty, which eludes any brain surgeon. Further, our domination over other animals. We have just the perfect combination of strength, intelligence, and structure to do so. If you made it this far, I salute you, and thank you for listening. I personally believe that the case for God is a lot stronger than the one against it, but what do you think? If you're more interested, I encourage you to have a look at the sources I have listed below in the description.